And suddenly, mid-air, you realize that one of the wings is collapsing.
Panic shock because I was in no pain. You can't stop it, okay, because it's 5 times stronger than you. You have to accept whatever the outcome is going to be.
What's your one advice to them? If you had to ask them to make a couple of changes in their life today, what would that be?
If you focus on any process, I do not want to get to that time in my life and have any regrets. When the doctor said, tomorrow will be my last day. Fact.
Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on Deep Talks.
My pleasure.
I want to start directly talking about that one episode that changed everything for you. It's 2009. You're paragliding somewhere in South Wales.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And suddenly, mid-air, you realize that one of the wings is collapsing. And now you know that something's gone wrong and you're falling, 35 feet to the ground?
Yeah, 15 meters.
15 meters. What
Yeah.
was going in your mind at that time? You know you're going to hit the ground. Tell us, what were you going through at that exact moment?
Yeah, I think my first thought was just the feeling of denial, because you don't want it to happen. You know, you go from one moment of euphoria to next minute almost then just being in panic mode, you know, shock, anger, because you can see the grass racing up, you know, at a rate of knots.
How many seconds is that
Oh,
approximately?
it's 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
It's like jumping off the top of your villa,
Right.
technically, you know,
Yeah.
because obviously within the first second, you're still moving forward, because I was probably traveling at probably about 30 kilometers an hour across the top ridge above the beach. So obviously when the canopy collapsed, you're still moving forward,
Yes.
and then the trajectory of moving down. And within 2 seconds, I can still see the grass coming up now, and then just hearing this almighty thud,
Yeah.
which was my feet hitting the grass. Yeah.
And what was it right after that? Was it like a complete silence? Was it a blackout?
No, I was fully conscious, honestly. And for 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, as I hit the floor and I rolled, I'm still attached to the canopy with my harness.
Yeah.
And because the wind was, you know, scrolling or rolling across the top ridge, it reinflated my canopy. And I got dragged for probably around 100 meters, uncontrollably, fully conscious. It was just like being, to use a metaphor, like a rag doll in a washing machine,
Right.
you know.
And then the next moment, so you said you're conscious, but then obviously there was you were taken to a hospital, and there must be a time where you completely fell unconscious within falling to.
No,
You were
I think
conscious all the
fully
time.
conscious from the moment I hit that grass to the moment that the first guy turned up on the scene who radioed for the air ambulance.
Yeah.
They turned up probably within about 11 to 12 minutes, and they were literally 60 miles away. So that just shows how quick, when a helicopter's deployed, how quick it can be on the scene.
Wow.
And I'll never forget lying on that grass.
Yeah.
It was this silent on the top ridge that afternoon. Beautiful. It was a May Day, Saturday, beautiful afternoon. And it was this quiet. And I could just hear in the distance, doof, 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 the helicopter coming into land.
Wow.
You know? And within probably another 10 to 15 minutes, they stabilized me onto the spinal board with a neck collar, and then put, you know, the morphine into my system.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when they lifted me, you know, into the helicopter, and airlifted me off then to the hospital. And I was in the hospital, honestly, within 4 or 5 minutes from takeoff to landing on the helipad. 4 or 5 minutes. Honestly, it was just crazy.
But was there a realization as to what has happened? And even though you're conscious, I know that something has completely gone wrong.
No, I think the first feeling was, and I've said this many times over the last 16 years, I felt a sense of safety. Okay, I was in no pain, even though I was totally paralyzed from my waist down. Yes, I was in a form of shock, but not panic shock, because I was in no pain. And I kept thinking, oh, maybe I've just broke both my legs,
Right.
you know? And it was that night in hospital after the MRI and the X-ray when the doctor said, unfortunately, young man, you've broken your back. And I said, sorry? Because you don't want to hear that news, you know? And he said, you've broken your back. You've got a huge thoracic fracture at T12. And I was like, oh my gosh. Because we think we're invincible.
Yes, we do. Absolutely.
I did. And most people, if they're honest enough.
I think that's very human. We all think we're invincible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was that night that I guess I'd almost left that healthy, active life behind,
Mhm.
you know, and then it was into a new life as a person of determination.
What was it like when the doctors came and told you that, Mark, this is now happened, it's a big accident and you might not ever be able to walk again, and your day-to-day life, as you know, is completely going to change? I mean, what was that moment? Because, I'm thinking if something like this, unfortunately, happened with me, it would get my world crashing down completely. What were those thoughts at that time, that your life is changing?
And I think those thoughts did go through my mind, you know, they really did. But then I suppose you keep resetting the situation.
Yeah.
You keep analyzing and resetting the situation to, it's happened. I can't change it. It's done. So what can I do to at least have some quality of life? Because, as an international speaker and executive coach, I say to people all the time, imagine if everything you currently have was taken away overnight. How would you cope? Well, just, buy another new house or buy another car or buy whatever. So you almost then reset.
Yeah.
However, as a speaker, I've said on stage, imagine if somebody takes away your sight. Just think about that for a moment. So you still have the house, the business, the car, etc., even though you probably wouldn't be able to drive a car if you lose your sight.
Absolutely.
But imagine if that's taken away from you, knowing you will never see your family ever again. Never see a sunset, never see a sunrise, never see any of your friends ever again. How would that affect you? It'll hurt you, it'll upset you, and it will really annoy you.
Yep.
But how quickly will you then say, I have to get on with my life?
Yeah.
Life has to go on. It's not the same as before, but now it's a new life. Does that make sense? And that's how I felt in hospital, very, very quickly. I can't change it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to focus on what I can do rather than what I can't do.
Yeah. So what were the questions like? Did you ask the doctor, will I ever be able to walk again? If yes, no. If yes, then how long would it take?
Yeah.
What kind of questions? So were you being told that this is it? You're never going to walk again?
They didn't know if I would end up in a wheelchair for a long period of time, because when you break your back, just for your audience, when you break your back, if your spinal cord is okay,
Yeah.
but just it's had fragments of bones, okay, from when, the vertebrae split, it has damage to the nerves that go to the muscles in my legs, which is why only half of my legs work. And you've seen today when I walked in, I walk like Charlie Chaplin, which is fine. It is what it is. However, if your spinal cord is split or cut, then all of the messages from the brain to the muscles are stopped.
Are cut off, yeah.
Cut off, which is why, unfortunately, people then who do end up in a wheelchair for life, even a quadriplegic, for instance, where they lose the muscle, the muscle messages to the arms and the legs. So I kept saying to the doctor, what's the possibility that I'm going to end up in a wheelchair for life? And he said, it's not going to happen because of your spinal cord has been, the fragments has damaged the spinal cord, but it's still complete.
Right.
And that was the kicker. So I knew at some point in the future, I could start to walk again, but albeit with crutches and a walking frame, So that was a blessing.
Right.
It really was.
And that kept you going, basically, that thoughts. Because a lot of people, and we'll also talk about your background a little bit, because a lot of people in this situation, might completely break down with the thought that they've damaged their spinal cord. They can't walk now, probably for a year or probably never in the right
Yeah.
way. A lot of people will break. And then it goes to your background, your childhood, how you grew up, your experiences,
Your values.
your values that shaped you to get out of
Yeah.
this calamity.
Yeah.
Tell us about your childhood a little
I've
bit.
said this for many, many years, okay? My childhood, growing up in a wonderful mining town in South Wales called Tredegar. Most people don't know where Tredegar is and probably would never know about it, But growing up in Tredegar as a mining town, heavy industries, okay? And the actual founder of the NHS in the UK, the National Health Service,
Right.
was a local Labour politician in the town where I grew up.
No way.
True story. The gentleman's name was Aneurin Bevan.
Okay.
Okay, great Welsh name. And Aneurin Bevan in 1946 founded the National Health Service in the UK from the town where I grew up. So why do I share that? That environment was about 7,000 people. Small, very small town, but very kind, caring people who would always look out for the neighbour. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I've come from that environment of support and care, okay? So, and I'm going to share this with you. So growing up as a child, it was okay to fall over playing football because somebody would help you up. It was okay to fall out of a tree when you're climbing because somebody would take you home with bruised knees or a cut elbow.
Right.
There was always somebody there to help you, So that's why when I spent 6 months in hospital in Cardiff, in my opinion, I had the best care possible.
Right.
So I could just sit back, relax, and just let the NHS do what they do best.
Right. I think that explains a lot of how you came out of it winning, where most people would break.
Think about it, okay? Think about this for your audience, okay? Everything that we do in life, we have a choice, depending on the level of risk, okay? I could not change my accident. I could not change my disability. So why keep thinking in the negative when it will never change? Does that make sense? Whereas if you think of time and the movement of time moving forward, certainly through positive psychology and having a growth mindset, I was always looking for the good and the positive.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't change the negative. I know I'm never going to run or skip ever again. But my question to myself when I left hospital was, what can I do? I know what I can't do, but what can I do? Does that make sense?
It's a brilliant attitude.
And that literally took me then down that path of, learning to cycle with a disability, thanks to an amazing cycling coach in Wales called Neil Smith. And even to this day, we're sort of 14, 15 years on now, I still can't thank that guy enough. And this is the funniest story behind my background. I remember going to the velodrome in South Wales, meeting Neil, who's a cycling coach, and saying to Neil, I want to learn how to cycle with a disability because I've cycled since I was a kid, like most people.
Yeah.
And Neil said, okay, I'll go and get you a bike out of the storeroom. Just wait 10 minutes and I'll be back. I said, yeah, okay. So he comes back with his track bike with stabilisers. And I'm looking at this bike and I says, whose bike is that? And I said, it's yours, jump on. I said, hang on, I'm 41.
Yeah.
I don't need stabilisers. He said, listen, young man, you've just broken your back. Now, you either jump on the bike or I'll put the bike away and you can go home.
Right.
I said, well, that's telling me. I said, oh, okay. So immediately I started listening to the experts because obviously it was a brand new life for me as a person of determination.
Yeah.
So I started riding the bike for about 6 weeks for stabilisers until they finally took them off.
And that changed everything. We'll talk about that. But before we get there, you said you were 41 at the time.
Yes, when I had my accident, I was 40.
Yeah, you were 40. And life at that stage, you have a lot of responsibilities, you have families, financial pressures, maybe a mortgage. Tell us a little bit about coping up with the financial stress apart from the physical stress that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I think at that point, 2009, I'd actually been divorced for, sort of 4 or 5 years at that point. My daughter, my daughter was obviously there. She saw me go through the trauma. My parents obviously were supportive, and certainly a lot of close friends as well.
Yeah.
And I think it was just that moment in time where, thankfully, I had money in the bank. I had an insurance to cover my mortgage. So, I suppose the extrinsic pressures were taken away,
Right.
and for me at that time, it was all about, I guess, self-care, mentally, physically, emotionally, to get through it, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen from one day to the next, and even to this day, my late father, he was a wise man. He was a true gentleman. Funny enough, my dad, his nickname was Mr. Nice Guy.
Mr. Nice Guy.
And he was a true gent, really was. And I'd been in hospital about 3.5 months, no movement in my legs, some really dark times, and my mum went to the bathroom one night before they drove home, and my father pulled the curtain around the bed, and he pulled his chair up close to me. And it's this quiet in the ward, in the spinal ward, And he says to me, do me a favor. Will you stop crying? Will you stop upsetting your mum? Stop upsetting me. Pull yourself together. I said, do you not realize I've just broke my back? Give me a break. He said, listen to me now. You're going to get through this because you're a winner. Are you listening? And I'm just like completely scared,
Right.
And he pulled the curtain around and he said, don't ever tell your mum we had this conversation, which I never told mum, And I think that was the pattern interrupt that I needed for somebody to see belief in me, and that was a game changer, for me. That was a moment in time I'll never forget.
Right. But then you're learning to walk. You're in the hospital. You're just facing this permanent disability. It's a very recent situation for you. And in 6 to 8 months' time, you decide you want to be a Paralympic cyclist.
Yeah.
That's a transition which is not normal.
I think that all stemmed from 1980. And to take your audience back to 1980, I was a 10-year-old boy, sat in my parents' living room, watching the TV with my dad. And we were watching, the Moscow Olympics. And there was a decathlete from Great Britain called Daley Thompson.
Okay.
And I remember saying to my dad, how come this guy is so good? Because, I was 10, I was into football and rugby and athletics and swimming. I said, how come this guy is so good then, Dad? Because he could run, he could jump, he could sprint, he could do long distance, And these were my dad's words. He said, listen now, Mark. He eats all his greens. He drinks lots of water. And he goes to bed really early. And I'm sat there going, yeah, okay, whatever. Now, this is the funny part of the story. To watch Daley Thompson win that gold medal, which I was like, wow, that's really cool, okay? So then 4 years later, when I was 14, and my dad and I watched Daley Thompson win his second gold medal in Los Angeles,
Right.
I genuinely thought that my dad had cracked the code to winning an Olympic gold medal. Eat your greens, drink your water, go to bed really early,
Wow.
And that stuck with me all through my life as a kid, So the dream to be an Olympian, to be a world champion, to be a world record holder, even to this day, I don't know why. I cannot give anybody a true answer on why I wanted to be that person. Whether it was an influence by Daley Thompson, I don't know, because my dad was... I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so my dad was my go-to guy.
Right.
My dad was my hero.
Right.
Even though Daley Thompson was probably my sporting idol, I always looked up to my dad,
How brilliant. Yeah.
So why did I want to become that champion? I don't know. But what I do know, and we'll come on to British cycling in a bit, is that when I spoke to Professor Steve Peters, who was a sports psychologist, he said to me that ever since I was a kid, I had this obsession with movement, because movement gives you dopamine, which is the happiness chemical that we have in our bodies.
Of course, yeah. Wow. So your first race, what I have here, was in May 2010. which was at the Wales Grand Prix,
That
which
was
was 1 year after your accident.
big thanks to Neil Smith there.
Neil Smith there. And you won 2 gold medals in the Wales Grand Prix, right?
Yep.
And then in London, the London Paralympics were in August 2012.
31st of August
2012. That's 3 years after your accident. So in little over 2 years from your first race to London Olympics, you won Olympic medal. Or you're competing at Olympic at that time.
So if you go back to May 2010,
Yeah.
which was the Wales Grand Prix, that was an opportunity for Neil to say to me, which is another pattern interrupt. I'm cycling, I'm just literally getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil said to me, because he knew that I'd raced triathlon before my accident, and he said to me, would you like to compete? I said, yeah.
Why not?
Did I know how to?
No.
Was I going to learn? Yes. And the one attribute I've always had is to be coachable. So as a kinesthetic learner, I learn skills by doing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Don't ever give me a book. Okay, I
Mhm.
know this is a terrible thing to say, so I've just written my book.
I love reading, so
But
you
I'm
can
the
give me all
opposite.
your books.
I'm the opposite.
Right.
Okay, I'm the opposite. I will listen to audibles all day long,
Yeah.
but I'm very hands-on. I have to learn by doing.
Right.
Okay. So obviously a big thanks to Neil when Neil said, look, we've got this race in a few months' time. I can put your name forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's against other international riders. And would you like to just give it a go? I said, yeah, okay. With no expectations, 0 expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2 races, which is called the Kilo, which is 4 laps of the velodrome, which I won. And then the Pursuit, which is 12 laps of the velodrome, which I won. So I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, it's 1 year after my accident, almost, to the month.
Yeah.
And I'm now winning races. This is interesting, So where does this take me?
Yeah.
And it was a big thanks to a gentleman I met on a charity cycle ride, which was actually a month after the Grand Prix. And this gentleman said, what's wrong with your legs? So I explained I broke my back, lower leg paralysis. And this was June 2010. And Dr. Ben Matthews, the gentleman I met, said to me, are you training for the Paralympics in 2 years' time? I said, no. Why would I do that? He said, well, to be honest with you, I think you should. And that was it. That was the light bulb moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to Neil Smith, I want to commit. I don't want to go back to work. I want to commit. Because of this reason, London 2012 was only going to happen once.
Mm-hmm.
In my life.
In your lifetime.
Okay.
Yes.
I wanted to be there. Just for the experience. Forget winning medals, world records. I just wanted to be there for the experience. Because it literally was 3 hours away from where I lived.
Yes. Yeah.
So I said to my parents that week, I'll never forget that I was going to commit to the Paralympics. And my late mum said, oh, good luck. What would you like to eat? Completely dismissed it. And my dad, God love him, he said, Mark, why didn't you just go back to work?
Right.
Forget this Olympic dream you've always had. I said, Dad, listen, I love you unconditionally, okay? And I would do anything for you. But on this occasion, I'm going to have to say no. And you either get behind me and you support me, or you get out of my way, because I'm serious. And he turned to my mother, he said, Margaret, have a word with your son. I think he's lost it.
And this is a crazy story, though.
Yeah.
2009, you're meeting with an accident. 2010, Wales Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Paralympic, cyclist. And then you win a gold.
And it was crazy. And it was a big thanks to Neil Smith. Never forget Neil as the facilitator. He's almost like a talent scout. Then the introduction into British cycling.
Yeah.
In my opinion, is the elite, of the sporting world. And when I arrived at British cycling as part of the Olympic program, I realized that I knew nothing, okay, about how to get to London 2012. I knew nothing, okay. All of a sudden, I've got 5 coaches who are the experts. I'm not the expert, okay. So you have a nutritionist who tells you what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat. because it works. You have a strength coach, you have a psychologist, you have a biomechanic who sets you up on the bike correctly. And then my main coach was a lovely gentleman called Tom Stanton. So you just have to become coachable. So when somebody says, do this, you say, okay, you can question it because you need to understand it as a human. But when somebody says you do this for this reason, you say, okay, and you just deliver the skills.
Right. But what was it standing on that podium, winning that gold medal, and your memories taking you back 2 years, 3 years down, and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Tell us, standing at that podium and receiving. And I know you've got something in that black box there.
Yes, this is what we call the chocolate. My daughter calls it the chocolate coin.
Fast, beautiful.
So it's 400 grams of Paralympic gold medal. The medals were made in South Wales in the Royal Mint, literally 12 miles from where I grew up, So this for me was a childhood dream, but in reality, it's 70 years of Paralympic history.
Yes.
Of what it means to people with a disability. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because life is all about ability, not disability.
That's a great point, yeah.
So yeah, it's
beautiful.
very proud moments for me.
And congratulations once again.
Thank you. But I think to answer your question, to use an example, when you've given up 3 years of your life to try and achieve something that you don't know what the outcome is going to be, okay? The outcome was the outcome that we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But when you stood there, the first feeling was of relief. It's over. Okay? All the hard work is now done. And this is obviously the outcome. But then you start to realize the feelings that you get are the same feelings you get on your birthday. When you wake up and it's your birthday and people are celebrating with you.
Mm-hmm.
For those people that celebrate at Christmas, it's those feelings, okay? Maybe Valentine's, maybe a wedding, a childbirth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's all those feelings that you get. And it was just all those feelings rolled into one. When you stood there and you go, oh, it's finally over.
Right.
I can now relax and the pressure's off and the outcome was exactly what we wanted.
Right.
But then the real value, and I've said this many times, the real value is after the Olympics. When you've got millions of people who you've helped to inspire themselves by them seeing exactly what I went through and what I achieved, all the blood, the sweat, the tears. And that's why the Olympic legacy for me is an ongoing part of my life now, certainly here in the UAE.
Yeah. So you think if you would have not met with that accident, this would have not been a part of your life?
No, because I think I got to probably late 20s, 27, 28. I'd been married for 6 or 7 years at that point. Still racing triathlon, still keeping fit. But there was no pathway.
No path.
There was no door that opened.
Yeah.
All through my 20s and even into my 30s,
Yeah.
So even though I guess the accident almost took my life, it also gave me the life that I always wanted. Does that make sense? And it's almost like, and I'll use this as an analogy, it's almost like life tests you.
Mm-hmm.
It tests you to make sure that what you really want, you deserve it. And are you ready for it?
Right.
In my 20s, I wasn't. I was just a working class normal guy, in South Wales.
Yeah. So you also once said that from being grateful to be alive to be obsessed with performance. So was this obsession healthy or was it a necessity?
I think at the time, go through from my teenage years into my 20s, into my 30s, the only thing that gave me joy was movement.
Right.
Whether that was running, swimming, cycling, rock climbing, playing squash, badminton, any kind of sport. Because that feeling, you couldn't replicate. I've never done the alcohol, the drugs, the party scene. I've never been down that road to look for that obsession. And yet every time I moved, it was free. Does that make sense? And even as a kid, my mum, God love her, she used to say to me, Mark, sit down. You're giving me a headache. Please. Because I just couldn't keep still.
Right.
Not because there was anything wrong with me.
Yeah.
Because I was in control. But it was like, this feeling is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's almost a feeling of joy in abundance.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when I joined British Cycling and they gave me my program and they would say, okay, you need to cycle, hundreds of kilometers a week,
Right.
I would be like, okay,
I'll do it.
I'll do it
Yeah.
because I love it. So to have, just to finish, to have that intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
whereas some people who have never done sport, who have never done movement or competition, to them it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
for me, it was easy,
Right.
And
you've mentioned in your training time, it was like a cycling prison or something of that sort, right?
Yeah,
And
no, that's very true,
I'm sure it
actually.
must have been very hard, hours of practice. Tell us a little bit more about this cycling prison.
Yeah, so the cycling prison was actually a nice place to be
Okay.
because people get this perception of a prison to be, a really traumatic experience. The reason why I use the word prison is because people understand that when you're in that environment, it's a controlled environment because it has to be, okay? But it's not meant in a way of, I suppose, breaking the law and being punished. But it's almost like you're in this environment that you can't get out of because you're locked in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's the feeling you get when you're in that environment where you're training every day, okay, 6 days a week with the same people, eating the same food, waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, showering in the same shower every day. And it's just that environment that at the time, there's nothing else. Okay, there's family on the phone and TV and stuff, but it was just that hamster wheel. And you have to tell yourself, it has to be like this for a reason because it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't train for the Olympics and work part-time and go clubbing and eat unhealthy foods. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the analogy of a cycling prison is meant in a respectful, positive way.
Right. Well, let's also talk about some external pressures here, right? You're from Wales. You're representing Great Britain in Paralympic. This was in 2012. The whole country is watching. And does it make any sort of give you any weird pressure that you're Welsh representing Great Britain? Is that any different kind of pressure?
No, I think the pressure comes from what you want to make of it. Okay. And going back to Professor Steve Peters at British Cycling, who wrote an amazing book called The Chimp Paradox.
Okay.
And it talks about the voice in your head, because in our head, there's two of us. Okay. Every human being, you have an emotional, voice, but you also have a logical voice.
Yes.
So the skill is how you train yourself to manage that emotional voice. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's 5 times stronger than you. But what you can do is accept it and manage it by telling it that you're safe and you're in control.
Yeah.
And then the voice dissipates.
Yeah.
That's how you cage the chimp, or you silence the chimp. So going into the Olympics, some people may say, well, you must have been under lots of pressure to win. Well, that depends on how you really put it into context for this reason. If you focus on any process, you have to accept whatever the outcome is going to be. Okay? Because you can't rewind and do it again. The Olympics is not a dress rehearsal. So it's to make sure that prevention's better than cure and everything's in place for that one moment in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then when you do deliver the performance of a lifetime, you have to then say, I did my best, and whatever the outcome is, you accept it, whether you win or whether you finish last. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So by me saying to my coach, Tom Stanton, I gave 100%, and he said, thank you. Thank you, because you cannot give any more than your best, because 110% doesn't exist. It
Right.
doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So learning the art of acceptance is part of the psychology of winning.
Yeah.
Now, is the win the medal, or is the win knowing you gave 100%?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's the 100%. That's your win. Because you can't expect to win on 90%, on 95%. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's coming back to, and I'll share this with you, with your audience, a great poem that I recite on stage called The Man in the Glass.
Okay.
And it's about being honest with yourself. Because you can lie to your friends and your family, try and lie to your dog if you want, but you cannot lie to yourself because you carry that trauma with you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, it's learning the art of acceptance in the process.
Talking about the chimp in your head, right? These are these negative voices that you hear in your head saying that you can't probably do it or you can do it. I know you're talking about all the good things right now, but tell us about the situations. I'm sure you must have been in those where you felt helpless and maybe that voice in your head takes over. What do you do in situations when you're alone, broken? I want to talk about that time.
Yeah, and I think, when I was in hospital, having studied psychology, a long time ago in college, I understood the difference between my emotional thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and my logical thoughts. And then joining British Cycling and having that incredible experience with Professor Steve Peters, who truly identifies, if you react, is it you, the human, or is it your emotional primate? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And you may have met people in your life, as a businessman, and you suddenly think to yourself, did they really just say that to me?
Yeah.
That's really, really out of character for that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's happened. Yes.
Many times probably, okay? So the question is, you don't know what's just happened to that person before they met you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Somebody scratched their car.
Mm-hmm.
They may have lost their phone. Something's happened that's triggered the emotional
Reaction.
chimp in them.
Yeah.
And you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
You're the first person they've seen, okay? And you just don't want to be there
Yes.
because they're like aggressive or they're nasty or they're abrupt or rude. And you're like, that's really out of character.
Yeah.
That's the chimp. That's the emotional primate in that person. And yet you meet them a week or two later and they're back to their normal, really kind, loving, caring human again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why in hospital, my dad knew that the person he was looking at was the emotional mark, not the logical winner. And that's why he had to snap me out of it.
Yeah.
Which he did.
No, but let's talk about still in doubt. I'm not sure if I'm asking you the right way. So the medals on the shelf, the crowd has gone home. Do you still consistently and constantly remain this positive, happy, and are always able to control your mind and not listen to external voices?
I would say, hand on heart, 99% of my life is calm.
That is an achievement.
It's
more than any other achievement, I believe.
It's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think having that logical brain to prepare and almost, and I would almost say give up a lot of things that I could do to replace what I need to do. Okay. And I said to you, I'm going to turn up at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I turn up at this time. I could have spent another hour with my friend this morning in the cafe. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But my values from being a child, which is, honesty, integrity, accountability. And my late father used to say, Mark, you're either early or you're late.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Nice Guy.
Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me all my life. Okay. So my point is, think about what you cannot change in life. Okay. Why allow it to upset you and frustrate you?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not upsetting you, the human. It's upsetting your chimp. Okay? Because
don't let it happen.
Don't let it happen. So because the chimp is 5 times stronger than the human, it'll always react first because it lives its life on emotions and feelings. So it will always react.
Yeah.
Okay. However, the human thinks with facts and logic.
So use that more often.
Use that more.
Yeah.
There's your state of happiness.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, Mark.
Powerful.
Is that what you teach when you're
It's what
coaching?
coach,
Yeah.
with the executive coaching
Brilliant.
practice that we have,
Yeah. So tell me, you were in the peak of your career, you won the gold, and 1 year later, you retire. Why leave when you have, probably could have some more promising years?
But I think the word in that sentence is could have.
Yeah.
Could have. London 2012, there was no pressure. Okay, I had nothing to prove other than go there, enjoy it, and give 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think a year later, having had the conversation with the coaches of British Cycling, think about everything that was on my vision board when I joined British Cycling. Okay, I wanted to become a world champion. Okay, tick. I wanted to represent my country at the home Olympics. Tick. I suppose it's every athlete's dream to win an Olympic / Paralympic gold medal. Okay, we achieved that. Tick. 2 world records in 1 day. Tick, tick. So to then come away from the Olympics, having lived out that childhood dream, I'll never forget a year after the games, sitting down with my mum and just saying to my mum, I just don't want it anymore. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I've got no reason to continue on to Rio because I've already got what I've been waiting for 30 years. So why do I need to give up the next 3 years of my life to go and try to achieve what I've already got anyway? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I think where the intrinsic motivation came in, back to Naira and Bevan, was how I'm starting now to help people on their journey through life for them to achieve their dream through what I've achieved. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's where the coaching came from.
And that's where the passion of reciprocity, helping other people, coaching other people, all of a sudden I'm getting these feelings of success, but through the eyes of other people.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When somebody rings you and they go, oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for seeing belief in me, So that's why I mentioned, about the Naira and Bevan, and obviously think about how many people since 1946 have been treated, okay, by the National Health Service in the UK.
I have no idea.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Must have been.
Yeah.
Okay. Certainly tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. Unfortunately, not everybody makes it. That's life.
That's life.
But think about how many people did make
Yeah.
it. I'm one of those people. I'm one of the stats. To have that spinal operation, to then have 6 months of care, 24 hours a day, to then leave hospital and go on and achieve, a childhood dream and inspire the next generation.
Yeah.
That's the true value of what Naira and Bevan did in 1946.
I think it's just about looking at good things in everything. That's what your core personality is. We get a lot of abuses for NHS all over. But I think with my little conversation that I've had with you today, I get this, that it's your mindset. It's you winning here before you winning out there in the world. That has changed everything for you.
Yeah, and it always has, ever since I was a kid. As I said, through school, college, and then life just in general.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a trait, I don't know, but I only know to give my best.
Yeah.
I've never had those feelings of whatever.
Yeah. But it's one thing to talk about it, and one thing is to actually feel it right in your core, in your head, in your heart. And I think you come from that point of view where you really feel it, and that we could see in the way you came out of your accident and winning a gold in Paralympic. But a lot of people talk about resilience and grit, but I'm not sure they understand the true meaning of it. These are fancy words to say, so they say it. What's your message? How do we develop this core resilience and grit?
I think it comes back to education.
Yeah.
Because, in my opinion, people want to learn how their phones work. Okay, show me how your phone works. Okay, how it works. But we don't think about how this machine works.
Yeah.
Does that make
Take
sense?
it for granted.
Well, we do, and we also think, well, I'll just eat and exercise and sleep and I'll be healthy.
Yeah.
Okay, but how does the machine really work? Like, you know how to turn your phone on,
Yeah.
you know how to put your password in, and you know how to log in.
Mhm.
But do you know how the software works? Most people don't, because they don't need to know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes
Because the
sense. Yeah.
phone works with or without you.
Yeah.
Your machine works with or without you. What if you had to really, this is a bit deep, so apologies, okay?
This is DeepTalks.
But think about if you had to operate your body. Think about that, like you operate your car.
Yeah.
Okay? What if you had to operate your body in the same way as your car or your phone? So you're cognitively thinking about what you have to do, even breathing.
Mhm.
What if you had to think to blink?
Yeah.
Okay? What if you had to think about moving your hands? Okay? Because we take these things for granted.
Absolutely.
So when you go right down to the cellular level of how does this machine work? Because it's not linear, because you have emotions and logic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So by identifying your thoughts, are they emotional or are they logical? And who's in control? Is it you or your chimp?
It goes back to the chimp and the
Okay.
logical brain.
Exactly. So that's why it's so important to be cognitively aware of who are you? Okay, 3 great questions here. Who are you? What do you want? And are you in control of your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then that brings you into the present,
Yes.
you know?
And being in present in the world we live in today with tons and hundreds and thousands and millions of distractions all around us, being in present, actually, it's getting difficult every single day.
Well, I think for most people, who go through life almost on this hamster wheel,
Yeah.
and they just go with life, And the one feeling I had as a kid, and I'll share this with you and your audience, I think I was maybe 13, 14, I can't remember, thinking that one day in the future, tomorrow will be my last day. Fact. I do not want to get to that time in my life and have any regrets.
Yeah.
Okay? I may not have my health by then. I may not have money. I may not have most of the things in life you need.
Mhm.
But the one thing I do not want is the feeling of regret. Because the one thing I've run out of is time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's too late then. So my point has always been, do it today. Do it for the right reasons,
Mhm.
but do it today. And that was, one of the reasons for moving here to the UAE. Because, I was, 51, 52. And I just thought, well, I'm halfway through my life and I need to look after my health. Because the one thing that, in my opinion, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
So if you're talking to somebody who's 28, 30 years of age, working 50 to 60 hours a week, the corporate world is tough, stress, deadlines to meet. What's your one advice to them at that very early age when they feel they have the whole life left in front of them and time goes by very fast? If you had to ask them to make a couple of changes in their life today, what would that be?
Well, it goes back to those 3 questions. Who are you and what do you want? And are you in control of your life?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I found in my life is that if I do what I truly enjoy every day, it doesn't feel like work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I watched my grandfather
Mm-hmm.
literally get paid in the mines of South Wales, the pits, digging coal with a shovel. That to me is work, physical work,
Yeah.
But then I suddenly saw more value in helping other people rather than taking the paycheck. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Some people say it's working smart nor hard. Well, I've done both and I've enjoyed both,
Yeah.
So I think the advice I would give somebody is to seriously think about your life and the environment and where you are right now. Okay? And my late father, another quote from my late father, it's not what you earn, it's what you spend.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you could earn all this money, but if you spend £1 more than what you've earned, you will be skint for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So my advice would be, do what you truly love, not for the paycheck, but what you truly love, because then you're not working, you're actually then getting paid for a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle career. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But my opinion is the value is in helping other people.
Mhm.
That's the true value.
Right.
Because, and I'll share this with you and your audience. Remember that when we work hard and smart through our life and we acquire the things that we've always wanted, as I said earlier on, the car, the house, the shoes, the whatever, holiday home, okay? When our eyes close for good, we then hand all of those things back. So technically in life, you only borrow those things. You don't take them with you.
Yeah.
What you do take with you, in my opinion, and another big thanks to my late father on this vision, what you do take with you is friendships, memories, emotions, experiences. That's what you take with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So from that moment as a kid, I just started to fill my life with abundance and experiences and friendships, And London 2012 was on that list.
Right.
Right.
So your one advice if I sum it up, is to be present, to know what you're doing, see if you're in the right direction, if this is what your end goal is. Does your work feel like play to you? Because then for everyone else, it might look like a lot of work, but for you, it's play.
Of course it is.
So ask the right questions and then evaluate where you are in life.
Well, it comes back to the poem, as I said earlier on, The Man in the Glass, because I say this so many times every week, and my father was right. When I used to work, like you said, 60, 70, 80 hours a week some weeks, because I had that athlete mindset, that drive, and everything else was insignificant because I was providing, for my family at the time. And I remember my father saying to me, are you working the weekend again? I'm like, yeah, I've got to earn more money. And my father was like, well, maybe you're earning all this money to impress people and they may not like you anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's got a point.
Yeah. So the biggest question is,
No.
do you want it or not?
You can go as deep as you want.
Yeah.
The question, in my opinion, is, what's the reason for you to do what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question.
And I had a beautiful, wonderful coffee this morning with one of my best friends here, and we used Elon Musk as an example. Okay, the guy is financially free. Sold PayPal, millions of dollars in the bank. He could have sat on a beach in the Maldives for the rest of his life with his family and not had a care in the world.
And look what he's doing.
But look what he's doing. Look at how many people he's
probably working 18, 20 hours a day.
Oh, probably more. Anyway, but my point is that look what he's doing for society. Look what he's doing for the evolution of society. Where we are right now. To be alive, in my opinion, right now is an amazing time.
Absolutely.
Okay, an amazing time. Because we've seen the transition in my life, through the Industrial Revolution, certainly into the heavy industries, in the 80s and 90s, and then the service industries, to then, having technology take over, And I'm just looking at your Apple Watch. And I remember seeing the very first Apple Watch a few years ago, my friend tapping the screen and answering his phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like Star Trek, So my point is, those people who grew up in the 50s and 60s have not seen this technological age that we know.
They haven't, no. And also the way the world is moving, I think in the next 25 years, the things that technology is going to change are something that we can't sit down here and even visualize.
I wouldn't even go that far.
Yeah, no.
I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why. The next 5 to 10 years is going to feel like 50 years.
Yeah. That's the speed at which the technology is changing.
The speed of change, exponentially, the compound effects happening with AI already.
Yeah.
And when you look around globally, take your head above the parapet and look around at how many data centers are being built.
Yeah. I know.
Okay.
Outrageous. So Mark, one final question for you is, let's go back to 2009, right? You went through the accident and then you had to go through the grind. trainings, sufferings, probably anxiety, gold medal, number of things. If you've given a choice now, you're in 2009, and you know this is going to happen, and you have the power of changing it for it to not happen, would you do it differently?
I'd go back and I'd live every day, 100%. I'd live every day knowing what I know now, even if I didn't know the outcome.
Right.
I would still go back and live that journey all over again, because every day, in my opinion, you should live like you lost. Because
You never know.
people, unfortunately, it is their
Last. Yeah.
you know? And it's just a feeling of reality, knowing how quick, life can be taken away, So that's why, I revert back to the poem once again. The man in the glass talks about being honest and truthful with you as a human.
Right.
The first person you need to love every morning when you wake up is you.
Yeah.
So would you lie to your best friend? Hopefully not. Would you be untrustworthy to your friends? Probably not. Hopefully not. So why are you untrustworthy and, mistruthful to yourself?
Yeah.
Because people go through life kidding themselves. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Yeah.
So the poem that I recite on stage is so powerful, and for the audience, I'd love to recite that.
Sure, please.
For you. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for the day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what the man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose decision on you must pass. The fellow whose version counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you, clear to the end. And you've passed your most difficult, dangerous test, if that man in the glass is your friend. Now, you may fool the whole world down the pathways of years and get those pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated that man in the glass.
Wow. That is deep. That is deep.
Powerful.
This is powerful. And this is exactly what I was speaking about a few moments ago, where in your core, in your heart, deep down inside you, that change has to be done, not just talking about the fancy words that the whole world wants to listen. So yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
This is a great conversation, Mark. Thank you so much for making the time and being so honest and candid. I really enjoyed this conversation, but I feel that we need to catch up more often and speak about a lot of things that we have in common. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.